Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. The wedding vows say, "Till death do us part." But sometimes that's not possible, and divorce is the only option. It's hard enough on the parents, but what about the children? How do they fare when mom and dad split up? How do you talk to them about this major change in their lives? How do they maintain a relationship with the absent parent? Does the age of your children matter in terms of coping skills? Up next on Another View, 3 experts on family dynamics share their advice. We're talking about children and divorce right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Before we get into our conversation today, I have 2 very quick announcements, but things that I think are very important for the community. First of all, if you are a woman who is unemployed or underemployed and you're looking to develop your skills, the Dress for Success is holding a career development and retention initiative program. Now, they got a grant from the Walmart Foundation, and they are going to provide 50 women with career guidance, technology skills, and support in their job searches. The Dress for Success will facilitate an 8-week workshop at Mount Lebanon Missionary Baptist Church and located at 884 Bells Mills Road in Chesapeake. Now, there's an open call for those of you who may be interested. You have to fill out an application, and then your application will be vetted by the Dress for Success staff to determine if you're eligible. Go to dressforsuccess.org/Hampton Roads. dressforsuccess.org/Hampton Roads, or call 757-679-7301. 757-679-7301 to get updates and to get your application, and we wish you the very best. And I also want to say a very, very special shout out to Benita Billingsley Harris, who is with Dominion Virginia Power, and Barbara Sierra, who is with News Channel 3, WTKR. They are both being honored today at the 36th Annual Conference on the Black Family at Hampton University. And right now, they're getting their honors while we're on the air. It's the Head Over Heels Luncheon, and they are in some real high cotton company, as they say. The honorees are Debbie Pollock-Berry, who is Senior Vice President of Human Resources with XO Communications, Benita Billingsley Harris, Manager of Media and Community Relations for Dominion Virginia Power, Barbara Sierra, Anchor News Channel 3, Lynn Harris Taylor, Vice President of Specials and Music Production for BET Networks, and Tina Lewis, President of the HRL Group. So congratulations, Barbara and Benita. They are paying honor to women who have successful careers but also put family first. And so I really like that. And that's what we're talking about today. But we're talking about kind of a sadder side of family, I guess, or a more difficult part of family, and that's divorce. It can be very, very messy, especially when children are involved. Now, there's no way around it. Everyone, mom, dad, kids, not to mention other family and friends, will all experience some hurt during this life-transforming time. But parents can mitigate the level of hurt and be proactive and positive when raising their children despite divorce. How? We've gathered a panel of experts to help us out. Please welcome licensed clinical social worker and therapist, Alfred J. Howard. How you doing, Alfred?
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And certainly no stranger to our program is Alvean Lyons. We know her as our relationship expert, but she's also the national spokesperson for the Family Forward Initiative and Youth Education and Family Services Partnership for the City of Hampton. Hi, Alvean.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back. And joining us by phone is psychologist and motivational speaker and dad and husband, as he likes to be called, Dr. Adolph Brown. Hi, Adolph. How are you?
Outstanding. Thanks for having me.
Good. So glad to have you on the phone. Now, Adolph you're in Ohio, right?
Correct. At St. Clair University.
Working with some teachers?
Yes, faculty at Sinclair University.
Fantastic. That's great. Doing some motivational speaking, huh?
A little bit more information.
More information this time.
Sharing.
Okay. All right. I want to throw this question out. I want each of you to answer it. Is there ever a time when a couple should stay together for the children? Let me start with you, Adolph, because you're joining us by phone.
No, I do not believe there is a time. In fact, what happens if that becomes the case, children will take ownership of staying together as well as the breakup, and that's not a responsibility that children should have. Children should be children, stay in their lane pretty much, and parents, if there's discord, and discord that can't be necessarily repaired or healed, so to speak, then the parents should seek appropriate measures, but definitely leave the children out of it.
Mm-hmm. So parents, if they cannot get along, staying together for the children is not the right way to go.
What happens, and I saw this as a college professor and dean, is that parents would wait until children went off to college, thinking that there was some type of magic appropriate age for children to be able to handle divorce. And what happens is that the older they are, the closer they are to making those kind of life decisions themselves. So unlike the preschooler or the teenager, so to speak, who still, is a difficult transition, the 22-year-old or 21-year-old college student is actually thinking about marriage themselves, and they start believing that that's their, that's their the likelihood
destiny
of their relationship, divorce.
Okay. Alvean.
I'd have to agree with Dr. Brown. There's no panacea. There's no perfect time. I can understand people trying their best, particularly for financial reasons, taking a careful look at when's the best time for us to split so that children don't suffer financially as a result of our separation. I do recognize that, and certainly in some of the more challenging economic times that we've had, it has meant sometimes that people have had to do some creative things in preparation for the separation. But I also agree that it is not in the best interest of the children for you to pretend or to try to minimize the magnitude of what's happening in the relationship in order to say that let's do this for our children, because ultimately I agree with Adolph, it ends up being about the kids, and the kids take on that responsibility as well. So I concur.
Alfred.
I'd have to agree with both of them. I think just to piggyback on both of you, I think you stay together for your marriage. The marriage is the foundation of the family, and so if that's not going to stay together for the two of you, if that bond isn't going to hold you two together, sticking together for the children doesn't do them any benefit.
And when you all talk about the children taking on that responsibility, then if you stay together, Alfred, and the kids then think that they are responsible for you because you are still miserable, but you stayed together because of them?
That very well could happen. Sometimes children blame themselves for the divorce. So them taking on that responsibility, what you want to try to do at all costs is kind of remove the children from kind of the adult type of issues. You want to shield them from those things because developmentally they're not ready to handle those sorts of things, and that's just not their place.
And when we talk about older children, teenagers, young adults, is it their place at that point? I mean, in other words, should we be sharing more information with them?
I think you share more information that's as age appropriate. Older children will want more details, but in terms of the more intricate details of why you're separated and things like that, I think that you have to, there's a fine line as to what you share, because they still are children of the both of you, and you don't want to vilify a parent versus another and make them choose and things like that.
Adolph, at what point then, if you and your spouse are struggling, that things, you guys have pretty much agreed you're going to get divorced. At what point do you sit down with your children to talk to them about your decision?
I think you would do that as soon as the two of you come to an agreement that that's what you're going to do, and an agreement on how you're going to discuss it with the children.
Expound on that a little bit. So you need to talk with each other about what you're going to say?
Exactly. as someone said earlier, it's a very fine line on kind of what you discuss. Are we going to say that we just don't get along, we don't see eye to eye? Are we going to talk about an affair? Are we going to talk about abuse? So when the two people can attempt to decide on what they're going to discuss with the children, then once they decided to get divorced, then I think they need to bring the children in and talk to the children. Children are very perceptive. Children know things before they're told. So it's no such thing as everyone that, if you live in a household, you kind of know what's going on in the household. So, I think children are much further ahead. Even if they may know divorce is going to happen, they don't want it to happen.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. If you are thinking about getting divorced and you want some advice on how to talk to your children about it, give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. I'd also love to hear hear examples of parents who have had this conversation with their children. What did you do? How did that go? Alvean, if a child, once the child is told, and the decisions have to be made on where they're going to live, how are you going to handle the custody, those kinds of things. Should a parent ever ask the child, what do you want to do?
Well, I think that is developmental also, because I do believe personally that children should have a say in the process if they're old enough to have a say. And when I say old enough, that means that you've established relationships in that respective community. You have a particular relationship, and it may be gender associated also. So it's not uncommon that same gender children will tend to want to go with same gender parents, because I know as a teenage girl, I'm going to need my mom to explain certain things. Or you can have situations where you have daddy's girls, for instance. I want to be with my father because that is truly the love of my life, so to speak. So there are complexities that exist in the dynamic of the family that if the child is old enough to have established very significant bonds in those kinds of ways, giving them the opportunity to share what they think. Mom, I'd really like to see you during the summers, and I really want to stay by dad because I'm getting ready to finish high school or I'm in middle school already. There is some logic, and kids are brighter than we tend to give them credit for. So they do have more of a sense than we recognize often in terms of what is really good for them. That's not for them to make a full decision about how things go, but it is to say that there should be some things that are taken into consideration, and admitting to your child, I may not be able to do this exactly the way you want it, but what you think matters in this. And Daddy and I will talk about it, and we'll try to work through the process.
Alfred, is it better to have joint custody where the child is going from household to household, or is it better from the child's perspective to just be in one household?
I think that's also something that's developmentally you need to consider that. I think early on, when they're very young, if you're divorcing your children are very young, it may be good for them. It often is very good for them to kind of do go back and forth between the parents quite frequently in the different households, because they get used, a little more accustomed to it and things like that. But and they may have less things going on, but as they get older, more activities are involved in more activities, school, becomes more prominent, things like that. You need to revisit that. You may need to revisit that and look at, having maybe every other week you share, go to a different parent's house or something, or you look at different holidays and things like that, and you fluctuate like that. But it really is something developmentally you need to consider.
Well, Adolph, but when parents, if you do share custody and you have one style of parenting and your spouse has another style of parenting, how do you avoid that thing that children do naturally even when parents are together, which is to play each other?
You don't, Barbara. The reality of it is everyone talks about having households that are consistent with routines and discipline. But the issue is that two adults were together, couldn't see eye to eye, couldn't make it work, basically they divorced because they couldn't live together. Now they're going to live apart and make things work. That's kind of a best world kind of scenario, and it doesn't happen that way. What you let children know is your dad may do different things than I do, or your mother may do things differently than I do, but you respect them, you respect me. Somebody has to take the high road, if not both people, because the child is both parents. So, you don't talk badly about the child when they're in one household versus another. So there are things that can be done to lighten the blow, but regarding, the making the household similar, Barbara, it's really a wish. I mean, and I've worked with enough couples in divorce, been there myself. It's really, the goal is to get them to respect the households as opposed to make them the same.
Okay, let's go to our phones because they are lit up. David joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, David. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have to agree to some aspect of the last commenter there. When I listen to this, it seems like, and not just this show, but you hear it across media and other shows as well. It seems like everyone wants to get on the proponent bandwagon of coming up with how to live apart and live separate and do all of these irresponsible things instead of placing more importance on the family unit and the two parents who got together in the first place. I disagree 100% that we should not stay together. I think that parents need to learn to stay together, and I've gone through that divorce scenario too. And what I mean by that is, I was 17 when my parents had divorced, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, am I going to be susceptible and predisposition to this type of irrational thinking that my own adult parents cannot rationalize and solve their difference? Am I going to have the same issues as I get into a relationship or get married or have kids?
Okay, David, let me let them answer that, because we do have a lot of calls, and that is a very good point that you bring up. Alfred, should he have been worried that he would do it because his parents did it?
Research shows that tends to predict whether or not you're going to have a divorce or whether or not you're going to have issues in relationships as well, whether or not your family, you come from a household that went through a divorce or had those similar type of issues. But when you go out and you have a relationship as an adult, you are then responsible for the direction of that relationship. You and that other person involved in that relationship. So what happened to you in the past doesn't have to predict your future. And so there are things that you can do, that couples can do previous to getting married. They can go to marriage counseling. You can go to couples counseling. It helps you deal with those issues that you may not think that you'll have or face in when you are married. And when you're married and you're having issues, go to couples counseling. There's always a way to get support. There's ways to keep divorce from happening, but sometimes people just have very distinct differences and they cannot work those things out.
Alvean.
Yeah, I definitely understand what he's saying in terms of the fear of it being a predictor. I recognize that and totally acknowledge that. And I appreciate what Alfred said, that it's not necessarily what has happened in your past is not necessarily a predictor of your future, although we do look at it in terms of research trends. But there is nothing that is absolute in any form or fashion. And the other thing is that we have to remember that parents, and this is not, and I know that some people feel that it's selfish to make a decision about what my particular happiness and my desires are when my children didn't get a choice in this process. And I know that that's very tough for people to kind of wrestle out, and depending upon what your faith and your orientation to things are, may influence those decisions. However, what is true is that you cannot pour water out of an empty vessel. If you've gotten to the point in the relationship where there is nothing left, you will have nothing left to give to your kids. So at some point, you have to recognize whether inside this relationship, with additional assistance, with perhaps scaffolding, with support from the outside, can you make it happen? Versus, am I better off if I separate and work on pouring back into me so that I can be a better parent to my children? There are times that it is healthier for you to go than to stay because of the children, not even about yourselves.
Everett joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Everett. You're on the air.
Thank you.
Sure.
I called because I went through the same scenario, but I stayed, we stayed in different rooms, but I stayed at the household because I wanted my kids to still attend the same school, to have the same community that they grew up in the house, that, all that. Now, once the last one graduated, I did go my own way. But my kids knew that like 6 years before that happened, and they didn't take it hard. They knew it was coming.
So they knew that you were going to leave eventually.
Right, but they appreciate the fact that I did, because it took 2 incomes to hold that house down. And if I wanted to provide them with the lifestyle that they had grown accustomed to, I needed to let them finish school. And I take the comment off the air.
Okay, thank you, Everett, for that call. Adolph, is that healthy for the separate bedroom thing?
Well, you know what? I've agreed with my colleagues. We got a lot of research out there, Barbara, but every child is a study of one. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean every child is different, and only parents know that child. So if it worked in his case, great. And I guess if we look back again at research, and I just kind of discounted it, but it usually says about 2 years after divorce and separation, children tend to somewhat kind of stabilize. Their behavior stabilizes. So if you can get through that process, then you're kind of almost there. Mm-hmm. But if it works for him, then definitely. I mean, he knows his children better than anyone else.
Absolutely. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call. Our experts are here to talk to you about your questions about dealing with children and divorce. Noah joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Noah. You're in the air.
Hello?
Hi, you're in the air.
Hi, yes. I've actually recently got divorced. I'm actually going through the finalization right now. But when I got divorced, when it first started, my daughter was only 8 months old. And I'm originally from Sacramento, California. I'm stationed in Norfolk right now. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question really would be, I mean, I know I'm going back at the beginning of next year. I get out next year. And I got a lot of factors that I have to deal with as far as establishing a better relationship with her, because we only really have kind of a quasi one when I go back home. And English is not her second, or it's not her first language. But more so when she gets older and if she inquires like why we couldn't stay together, I don't know what to say to her. I think that's what scares me the most. And I guess I'll take that comment off there.
Okay, thanks, Noah, for the call. Alfred, you want to take that one on first?
Yeah, sure, no problem. That one, it really depends on, like we mentioned earlier, it depends on the age. It also depends on your connection and relationship with that child. He's saying that
because his child now is a baby.
Right.
And he's worried about when she grows up and says, how come you didn't stay with my mom?
Right. So if she's a teenager, let's say late adolescent, you can share that, me and your mom, we just couldn't work things out. Whatever it is that you have to determine what your relationship is with that child, how mature that child is to handle certain information. But what you need to be sensitive about the details of that, and you need to talk to the other parent. It would help to talk to the other parent before.
Mm-hmm. What do we? Both of you have the same story.
Exactly. If you can do that, so that way you aren't telling conflicting messages. You want to kind of make sure you agree to what you want to agree to a deal as to what do we say? What's okay? How do I say this without making it seem like I'm putting you in a bad light versus me, and being biased and things like that. If that is possible, if not, then you just try to say things without putting the child against the other parent.
Other parent. Alvean, since his child is so young right now, wouldn't another thing be to establish his own relationship with the child? So that as she's growing up.
We have to remember, there are two things I want to say about that. The first thing is that we have to treat, my approach to dealing with that is that you have to treat it sort of like a tree. If you ever cut a tree, you can see the rings in it. And the truth is that if we start with the truth, then how many rings are added to that over time matches the developmental progression of the child. But you always want to start with the truth. And when I say that is the developmental truth. If we couldn't work it out, and that's what we say when the child is 5, then by the time the child is 15, what not working it out might have looked like. By the time the child is 18 and they're establishing their own adult relationships, the complexities that may come with not being able to work it out. And we go through those rings, but it always starts with the truth, because children need the truth. So that's that's the first thing I would say where that's concerned. And to your point about establishing an individual relationship, absolutely, because the kid's greatest fear is I'm going to lose you. That's what they care most about. Yes, there is the marriage as the whole, the unit, that I'm part of something that is whole. But the ultimate fear is what's going to happen in terms of my heart and your heart. And if you're going to be an active parent in the process, you're going to be engaged in my development to the best of your ability based on demographics, where we are, so on and so forth, then you have a lot less to worry about than when you are absent and divorced. Those are two losses for a child that is far more difficult to get past.
And Adolph, I was reading some literature that said that that men in particular, if they're not the primary custody person that has custody, if the man is not that after the first 2 or 3 years, he kind of disappears.
Yeah, and that's a twofold study, Barbara. They're either talking about men seeing a marriage as a package deal, basically the entire family unit, and not necessarily meaning to do this, but sometimes unconsciously it happens. When I divorce the wife, then it also looks like I've divorced the kids. That's one thing that can happen. The other thing that can happen too, Barbara, is that you have some women that overfunction. And overfunctioning basically means that they do so much for the children that it doesn't leave a role for the father to get or to have. So those are the two actual dynamics in which that can occur.
That's very, very interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
It's
Eve
so
joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Eve. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my call.
Sure.
I hear a lot of negativity about divorce, and obviously even saying it, there's just a certain connotation to it. My ex-husband and I were married for 5 years. We were dual military, and I asked for a divorce after trying all the therapies, the chaplains, everything that you can imagine. We just were not a good fit together. I asked for divorce when our son was 6 months old. We decided from the beginning that we were going to co-parent, and so even though we didn't live in the same place, he always went to the same school. He always participated in the same activities with the same friends, the same extracurriculars. So whether he was at his dad's house or my house, his dad would take him to school where I lived. He would take him to extracurriculars. I would do the same. We remarried. Both of us happened to remarry, and he actually walked my son down the aisle as the ring bearer when I was remarried. He's best of friends with my husband now. We ended up both having girls within 2 months from each other. We celebrate every holiday together, every birthday together. Even my daughter calls him Uncle David. And the love that we have between these two families surpasses any love that we had between each other. And so I think if you keep the respect for the children always primary, then this can occur.
Okay, Eve, thanks so much for sharing that with us. Alvean, I saw you smiling as you listened.
That's an ideal scenario. I mean, I absolutely love what Eve is saying. A lot of times, unfortunately, by the time people separate, they have become so venomous with one another that it's so much more about winning than really being co-parents anymore. And it requires a level of maturation for us to be able to look beyond the moment and understand what the greater mission is. And our job as parents is to understand that our mission is to raise healthy, well-adjusted children. And that may mean that I have to suck up my feelings sometimes, and that may mean that I don't say what I really want to say sometimes. But Adolph mentioned earlier that you're 50% of the other partner. And I think it's so important that in order to make this thing work, navigate this space, requires that every time you're with me, I understand that the person that I may not have been able to work with is 50% of who you are. So when I talk bad about them, I'm talking bad about 50% of you. And you may not be able to make that distinction. So I need to keep my issues with my ex-partner with him or her and not make that about you, because you're still defining who you are as as a human being. And when you do that, you position yourself for healthier co-parenting and later on being able to have these extended families where it becomes addition rather than subtraction.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about children and divorce with psychologist Dr. Adolph Brown, therapist Alfred J. Howard, and relationship expert Alvean Lyons. Let's take Sherry from Yorktown. Hi, Sherry, you're on the air.
Hi there. Hello to all. My situation is somewhat similar to other people that have other callers and what have you. I was divorced way back in 1988, and we had 3 children at the time. Well, in a way, I had it a little different than a lot of other people because I divorced a divorce attorney. Now, that is not necessarily your easiest thing.
I'm sure.
I've often said he's a great father, a great attorney. 2 out of 3 is not bad. And that's my contract. However, 3 things that we discovered way down the pike, now that the children are in their late 30s and early 40s, and that is, number 1, we did a separation first of all, with couples counseling, tried to do our best and so on, but ultimately went to filed for divorce. Number 2, without agreement between my ex and myself, we put the children first and did not put them in the middle by ever bad-mouthing them. One of the last callers said about doing things, keeping their life on an even keel, we did it. And the children saw this. And number 3, whatever the real reasons that occurred to cause the split, I knew the children would find out on their own, and each of them has. And they have reported back over the years that they were very appreciative that we didn't make enemies of either parent. And I had no idea that it was going to have that type of outcome, but it was wonderful.
Wow.
One little note, Divorce Care is a program all over the country that has through churches, non-denominational, and it is fabulous. I know it's in this area, and it's something that helps people. It wasn't available back when for me, but I've been a little bit a part of one here that has helped people get through the process and on to where they need to be.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sherry. We really appreciate it. I'm so sorry.
A lot of A's in here. A lot of A's.
They are. Adolph is what I'm trying to say. I'm really having a hard time today. I apologize. Adolph, how important is it when you're going through this whole process that each parent maintain discipline in terms of the children's behavior?
Oh, it's extremely important. Every child needs consistency, structure, limits, and boundaries. And for those that are listening today, that's not the child's language. It would basically mean Burger King may have great burgers, but children can't have it their way. So they need to basically keep the children, keep their behavior in check. And co-parents sometimes do it differently, Barbara, but the issue is you got to keep it in check, because when a child is going from household to household, first of all, they're sometimes manipulative or try to split when both parents are in one home. So now that you have 2, and when communication is limited, children tend to kind of take advantage of that. So behavior can become more unruly. So it's imperative that parents keep those discipline, those stakes in check.
Alvean, you want to react to?
I totally agree. I think that, yes, it's true that we may do different things in different households, but the wonderful mechanism that exists with all children is their ability to be multilingual. You watch it with small children that if their grandmother only speaks Spanish, they only speak Spanish with abuela. There's no difficulty with that. But their parents only speak English, they speak English at home. They find out that their teacher speaks Chinese, they learn that very quickly too. They're fully capable of being able to speak the language of the person that they're with. So there are ways for us to be able to say, okay, I respect the fact that at mommy's house, you do that. And that's perfectly fine when you're with mommy. but you're with daddy now. And at daddy's house, when we finish eating, we pick up the dishes, we put them in the sink, because that's the language of daddy's house. I don't have to talk poorly about the fact that mommy's house speaks Spanish and in this house we speak English. Instead, I could simply say that I respect the Spanish spoken in mommy's house and I expect you to speak that there. But over here, this is what we're going to do. And that allows us to not be negative or inappropriate where the other parent is concerned.
Alfred, are there signs that you should look for in your children as you're going through this process so that you can make sure that they are expressing what they're thinking, that they're okay?
Yes.
Because sometimes I would believe children would shut down as a possibility too.
Sometimes they may shut down, become a little more isolated and things like that. But there are several signs that you can try to be aware of to see if there's changes in your child's behavior, their sleeping habits, their whether or not they're sleeping through the night, having nightmares or things like that, eating habits, their interactions with their friends. If there's a change in their behavior at school, you're not looking at just one single incident. You're looking at a pattern of changes and things like that. Whether or not they're having tantrums or they regress a little bit in age. Their behaviors tends to look like they're regressing in age. A 3-year-old may act like a 2-year-old, or a 4-year-old may act like a 2-year-old, things like that. There's several things, but if you start to notice some changes, because you've probably been observing your child for quite a bit of time, and you know kind of like where they are with things, how they, what their habits are and things like that. But if you start to see a consistent change of patterns, you can try to respond to that. That's kind of like a sign. Those subtle signs that your children may be showing you.
And what should you do if you notice those?
Well, first thing, you need to check in and ask them how are they doing with the divorce or the information they're getting. Are they scared? Are there things that they worry about? You kind of want to reassure them that there's still going to be love. The things that you can reassure them about, reassure them about. Answer questions that maybe they haven't asked.
And should you be honest with them? Is it okay to
honesty
say?
Is the most, you mentioned that earlier. Honesty is the most important thing to do throughout this process.
So if you're
you have
afraid
to be clear.
through this process, it's okay to say that to your children?
Yes. You could.
Go ahead, Adolph. We'll get you too.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add that in noticing the children's behavior, it's important that the listening audience understand that when a person is going through a separation or a divorce, they're in the height of emotional turmoil themselves. So oftentimes, the children are overlooked, and not overlooked purposefully, but overlooked to the extent that the amount of anguish, the amount of, as my colleague said, the venomous behavior, those types of things can consume adult behaviors.
Adolph, I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't want to answer this question, don't. But since you mentioned earlier that you have gone through a divorce, can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Sure, definitely. Someone had to take the high road, and eventually we both did. As far as what happened between us, my answer was always we couldn't get along, and that answer stuck with them until they went to college. And they eventually found out, like one of the callers called in and said, they eventually found out. But
details,
I never, ever said anything disrespectful about their mother. And in doing so, Barbara, there were times that they wouldn't have visitation with me for one reason or the other. And the different people that I had helping me through this would tell me things like, just keep the high road, stay the high road. And now, Barbara, both of the children live with me as adults, young adults.
Wow. That's great.
So, and it's not a win situation. And I think people sometimes will assume that, well, now look who's with you. It's not that. It's more or less, I still require them to respect their mother. I still require them not to say anything bad about her, regardless of what's said about me. But the issue is that eventually they found out on their own.
Okay. And we've got about 3 minutes left, so I want to give each of you an opportunity to say something to a parent or parents who are going through a divorce now or thinking about this process and thinking about their children. What piece of advice over anything would you give them? Let's start with you, Adolph.
Okay. I would say, Barbara, that everybody says, as cliche as it is, that, marriage is in because of difficulty in communication or finances. The number one correlate to divorce is getting married. So we need to focus on what we do before we get married, whether it is, focusing on ourselves as individuals and making sure that we're healthy, making sure that we're not going into a relationship saying, I need this person to complete me, when in actuality you want someone to accept you completely. So I think we need to focus on who we are before we get married.
Okay, psychologist Dr. Adolph Brown, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you later. Alfred.
I think it's important to remember for our callers that when you're going through a divorce, you're divorcing your partner. You're not divorcing your child. And so you want to reassure them that in any way possible, through all your efforts, you are going to try to maintain that relationship. You're going to continue to love them. You're going to be consistent. You're going to do everything to try to help them adjust through this process. And, it's important for the parents to remember that this separation between you two is between you two. And you try to keep the children out of it. You keep them informed. You be honest with them. You don't give them more details than what they ask. And you try to be sensitive that they are going through this as well. And so you pay attention to the changes that your child may be making.
Therapist Alfred J. Howard, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They can find my profile on Psychology Today or contact me at ajlhoward at gmail.com.
Okay. Alvean, Lyons, you get the last word.
Well, I definitely have to thank my colleagues in this process because we agree on so many different levels. But I would say that and I mentioned it lightly before, but the mission has to be greater than the moment. In the moment, we are going to have all kinds of feelings, and they are real. They're very real. And perspective is a reality. So whoever's going through it is 100% sure this is what's happening at that particular moment. And that is true as an adult, and it's true as a child. But we have to make sure that the mission is bigger than those moments. If the mission is for us to walk away healthy and whole, despite this bump in the road, it is not defining of who we are. It's not defining of any of our futures. It's not a deficiency per se in any one of us that we couldn't make it happen in this particular recipe. But the whole thing is not broken as a result of us needing to make the adjustment. So recognizing that there's something bigger than us in the process, and we have to be able to move past this moment in order to get to that place, and give yourself permission to make mistakes in the process, but never give yourself permission to disengage altogether, because your kids need you and you need you.
Okay. Alvean Lyons, our relationship expert. Thank you all so very much for this great conversation, and we'll be right back. Okay. And that's music from our very own Jae Sinnett with the Jae Sinnett Trio, House and Sinnett, which is his R&B band, and producer and host of Sinnett in Session, heard here on WHRV-FM Monday through Thursday at 9 p.m., the R&B Chronicles Friday nights at 7, and Sunday Jazz from 1 until 5. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Barbara. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. We always have such a good time. As a matter of fact, when we did that last show together on the pairing of food and jazz, do you remember that?
Right, yeah,
People loved it. I mean, I got lots and lots of comments about that. So what's going on?
We have a special concert here, members-only concert, next Friday night at 8 o'clock here. And very quickly, I think I explained this to you, broke this down, how we were doing this. It was a pledge event for our past February radio fundraiser. If you made a contribution of $120, minimum of $120, and you did not get a premium, in other words, if you didn't get a CD or tickets to another show or something like that, you can get a pair of tickets for this show. If you did get a premium and you pledged at least $120, you can buy the tickets for $15. And it's a very special concert. It's kind of a larger ensemble for me, sextet and septet, 3 horns, 4 horns, and our very special guest saxophonist Steve Wilson will be here, who's a Hampton Roads native. He's from Hampton.
And the concert is going to be right here in the WHRO studios?
WHRO Teleconference Center. Mm-hmm. And if you're a current member, meaning if you pledged last October or April, and your membership is still current and you pledged at least $120, you can buy a pair of tickets for $15 to see the show. It's going to be a smoking night of jazz, too. Looking forward to this one, Barbara, because we're preparing for a new recording.
Okay, so I was going to say, because this is a kind of a special concert for you, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm actually preparing to do what I believe is my last jazz recording as a leader. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I just want to do some other things,
So what else do you want to do?
Well, you heard a little bit of House and Senate playing right there. And actually, that track is going to be on the record.
Okay.
Bring back the bands. Because nobody heard the House and Senate record. So put that on there. I just want to do some different things, man. I mean, my objective with jazz was met in that I wanted to create a body of work. And after 11 recordings, I think I've done that already. And plus, I think this record and this music, I've always wanted, just musically speaking, very quickly, I always wanted to write more thought-provoking, deeper melodies, because I think that's something that's really missing in music today, melodies. And I'm old enough to remember a generation when there were beautiful melodies and songs. Now, I mean, you hear something today, you're not going to remember it a week down the road. And because there's no depth in the music anymore. So I just wanted to really focus for the past few years on writing more thought-provoking melodies. And I think this music reflects that.
Well, Steve Wilson will be with us in the studio playing next week. We have a song called Bedrock. Let's listen to a little bit of it. This is... You can't hear it?
Oh,
That's
okay.
good. Yeah. So that's Steve Wilson on horns and you on percussion?
Well, the group will be my trio with pianist Justin Coughlin.
Okay.
This song, by the way, is from Senate Hearings. It's not from anything new we're doing. Steve will be playing alto and soprano saxophone. My trio with Justin Coughlin, Terry Burrell, and Bill Brown, former jazz director at CNU, will be playing trumpet, and J.C. Cool, wonderful tenor saxophonist out of Richmond, and Mike Oates, one of the great military trumpeter, will be in the horn section. So it's going to be a really nice band.
Do you think that will we ever get another jazz club back here again? I know everybody was really sad when Havana Nights shut down.
The people familiar with Havana Nights, that whole situation, it was really a 3-in-1 venue. And my view, it wasn't the jazz venue that brought it down. It had a restaurant separate, it had a private cigar bar separate to that. And so, you had a lot of things that had to work, simultaneously. And I don't think that happened. But the jazz club was packed every weekend. Now, will we ever have another one? That's up to the people. I mean, the question I get asked the most, Barbara, during my show is where can they go hear live jazz? I tell them, and then you don't see them. Okay,
so where can you go to hear live jazz?
Well, there's no place to hear it now because nobody came out. No, seriously. Friday, next weekend, you can hear some jazz. And the same band, by the way, will be playing up in Williamsburg. We will be doing 2 nights at the Williamsburg Library Theater, starting at 7:30 on next Saturday and Sunday. The Friday night concert is right here at WHRO, and it's a members-only event. And by the way, I didn't let people know how they can get those tickets.
Yes, I was going to ask you that next.
Call me if you're a current member at the 120 level and you want and you didn't get a premium for the February fundraiser and you would like the tickets, you can get those at no additional cost. If you pledged at least 120 and you didn't get a premium, if you did get a premium, you can buy the tickets for $15. If you're a current member from last year, at 120 or above, just call me at 757-889-9301. And that's 889-9301. We get accused for giving numbers too quickly.
Exactly. I know. Yes, we do. 889-9301.
And I'm excited about it. I think it's a heck of a band. I'm excited about the new music. And
now, have you written? Were you the one to write all of the music?
I wrote and arranged all the music. Yeah, and there's only one standard. I did a whole reharmonization and a rearrangement on Sunny. Mm-hmm. Remember the Bobby Hebb classic, and so that's the one standard.
So I hear people say to you, though, because we've been out at public functions together and so forth, and when you were mentioning about the R&B album not doing quite as well as your jazz albums, but people really equate you with jazz. Are they ready to let you go into another genre?
Well, I think the House and Senate project, I didn't start off playing jazz, Barbara. I was a funk rock drummer, when I had hair back in the days when I had, but it's like, so jazz actually came later, so people who really know me know that that's in my background, but I'm not going to stop playing jazz. I'm just talking about recording. Plus it burns you out. Mm-hmm. I've been writing for the past 2.5 years, and I think my head's going to explode right now, but it's all finished. Plus I've been preparing the trio to perform with orchestra. So we've been doing orchestrations on my music as well, and we have our first orchestra performance up in Minnesota in July.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's another project that I'm involved with. So writing, has just really been, taking up a lot of my time. Mm-hmm. And right now, I'm just ready to go. I just want to play the drums and not have to deal with, the peripheral. You know what I mean?
So of all your music that you've ever done, do you have an absolute favorite song? You can tell them. You can tell us.
Favorite song?
Or favorite album. All right, let's say album.
I like each of the albums for different reasons. People who are familiar with my jazz records will probably say The Senate Hearings is the best record. I think Still Standing is my best record from a compositional standpoint and from a performance standpoint. Because a lot of times in records, and I hear a lot of music, you have one or the other. You have great composition and average mediocre playing or phenomenal playing over mediocre material. And so ideally you want to have both. And I think I really accomplished that with Still Standing, having a very deep compositional element to the record, and the playing on the record from everybody was fantastic.
All right, give the phone number one last time before we run out of time.
If you want to get the tickets, call me at 757-889-9301.
History in the making. Join us for the concert next Friday night. That is the 29th? 28th.
Members only.
March 28th, members only.
29th and 30th in Williamsburg.
29th and 30th in Williamsburg. Thanks so much, Jae,
Thanks,
for joining us. And that's our show for today. Do me a favor and tell a friend about Another View. You can share today's show with them by going to anotherviewradio.org, where you will find the podcasts of all of our programs. And while you're there, sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. And we're on Facebook, so be sure to like us. Next week, we're going to talk about eye care. You'd be surprised how much of the health of the rest of you affects your eyesight. Join me and Dr. Keith Newby for Another View on Health. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jae Sinnett. Our show producer is Lisa Godley. Our audio engineer is Victor Bowen, and Denise Norris answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fantabulous weekend. Enjoy the great weather, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.